Good afternoon. I would like to call the meeting on Assembly Committee on Revenue to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assembly members Considine, De Silva, Flanagan, Gallant, Goulding, Gray, Hafen, Wynn, O'Neill, Roth, Chair Backus.
And I am present. Please mark Assemblymember Gray present. When he arrived, he was here and I think had left. Also, we do have members today who will be stepping out to present bills in other committees, so please don't look at that as any disrespect. I would like to welcome those that are present here in Carson City, as well as those in Las Vegas, as well as those appearing via Zoom. One key thing I would always like to remind individuals: when you're speaking at the microphone, it is a weird thing, but please state your name before giving testimony before us today. It makes our secretary's job a lot easier when she's preparing the minutes. With that, we have two bills on our agenda today. We have a bill hearing on Senate Bill 41 as well as Senate Bill 451. We are going to take those bills out of order. And so with that, I'll go ahead and open the hearing on Senate Bill 451 and welcome Majority Leader Cannizzaro up, as well as Sheriff McMahill, to present on this bill. I also believe you guys have individuals that may be appearing by Zoom. Or maybe it's testimony and support? Okay, and so what I will do is after we get done here, I'll go up to the Zoom line for testimony and support. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Nicole Cannizzaro, and I proudly represent Senate District 6 in the northwest portion of the Las Vegas Valley and serve as your Senate Majority Leader here in the Nevada Senate. I am very honored today to present to you Senate Bill 451, which extends existing revenue that funds more than 800 officers with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department without the need to raise any new taxes in this committee. So by way of background information, Senate Bill 451 very simply maintains an important public safety funding system that is vital for the safety of our communities and our tourism-dependent economy. For a little background on this issue, you have to go back to the general election held in November of 1988, where voters in unincorporated Clark County and the city of Las Vegas approved the imposition of a property tax rate of 8 cents on every $100 of assessed value for the purpose of employing police officers with the LVMPD. 8 years later, at the general election, November 1996, an additional rate of 20 cents on each $100 of assessed value was approved by the voters of for the same purpose, but with an expiration date of June 30th, 2027. Senate Bill 451 maintains that existing 20 cents per $100 of assessed valuation for the purpose of funding additional police positions by requiring the Clark County Board of Commissioners and City of Las Vegas to then impose an ordinance extending that levy for an additional 30 years. In short, we don't need to raise rates. We don't need to raise any new revenue from property owners. We just need to keep this dedicated funding stream in place so that we can keep these 800 plus officers on the streets. This revenue source, as a matter of magnitude, generates roughly $158.4 million annually that goes directly to pay for officers serving in our community. In fact, this funding supports nearly 1/4, or about 825 officers of LVMPD's sworn workforce. Those 825 officers are equivalent to about half of Metro's patrol force, the officers who are on the street and respond first when our residents need them. I believe that a failure to maintain this revenue stream is simply unacceptable, as it would result in a reduction in force, leading to fewer officers on the street and potentially decreased response times in our community. It would also likely mean shifting revenue sources away from investigatory positions to fill the gap in what patrol officers that would certainly emerge if this were to be cut short. I am here and grateful to be joined by Sheriff McMahill, and he can speak a little bit more in detail about the impact that losing this funding would mean for his department and what impact that would have generally on policing in Clark County. But I will just say that as a former prosecutor for over a decade, who spent a lot of time in the gang unit, I'd like to highlight this last aspect in particular, because this isn't just about maintaining a certain number of patrol officers on the street at any given time. When you talk about investigations and prosecutions of major crimes like gang activity, drug trafficking, murder, sexual assaults, those types of investigations are extremely time intensive. They take dedicated detective units to be able to conduct the kind of proper investigations into those much bigger, more complex crimes. And those detectives can spend days, weeks, months, even years on their cases to sort of build them. And if we have to move a significant portion of Metro's investigatory positions into patrol positions to just keep up with making sure that our community has officers who can respond when you make that call, that is going to make sure that we do not continue to have the ability to investigate these much more serious crimes, and that would be a significant reduction in our ability to successfully prosecute many violent and complex criminal cases. Before I pass it on to Sheriff McMahill, I would like to provide just a very brief summary of the bill, section by section, beginning with Section 1. So Section 1, subsection 1, again, requires the City of Las Vegas and Clark County to impose that rate for the support of the LVMPD for the purpose of employing additional police officers. Section 1, subsection 4, provides that the rate imposed by the bill is not exempt from any partial abatements, which limit the annual increase in property taxes to 3% for single-family residences and eligible residential rental properties. It also clarifies that the rate imposed by this bill is not subject to NRS 354.59811, which would limit those tax rates levied by local governments. Section 2 clarifies that the tax rate imposed by this bill will continue to be apportioned within the taxing district in the same manner as it has been since 1996. And with that, Madam Chair, two things I wanted to just very quickly note before turning it over to my co-presenter. This simply maintains current funding that directly goes to those officers. If for some reason this bill does not pass, that funding stream does not exist to fund LVMPD, a quarter of their officers, over half of the patrol force. But also, I would note that if this bill does not pass, nobody is going to see a reduction in their current property taxes that they pay. That revenue will simply go to other sources. And so the question before this committee and the purpose of this bill is just to maintain that as a portion of revenue that currently goes to fund those officer positions for which there is not another way to fund. And so with that, Madam Chair, what I would like to do is turn it over to Sheriff McMahill to add a little bit more context for what this means for LVMPD, and then we'd be happy to take any questions that you or the committee members may have.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee, as well. Senate Majority Leader Canizaro, thank you so much for your testimony there, and I will not go over all of the things that she has already covered, just in the interest of time. However, the latest numbers that we have is this is funding 860 total members of my organization. That includes their cars and their radios and their equipment and the training that's provided to them. I think you all understand exactly what that looks like in losing 860 members of a very professional police organization. Maybe I forgot to say my name there. I apologize. Kevin McMahill, elected Clark County Sheriff and leader of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I wanted to get to the facts so quick. I apologize. I had to backtrack there for you. But the reality of this is that we are making substantial progress in our fight against crime in Clark County. Since being elected sheriff over 2 years ago, year over year, we saw 20% reductions in homicides as well as robberies both years. We are today at a 33% reduction in homicide year to date and a 10% reduction in robberies. And what I want you to think about is these are real human beings. These aren't just numbers that we're talking about. When I took over as sheriff, there were 158 homicides that year. This year, we are going to get under 100 homicides in Clark County for the first time in a very, very long time. I think the larger issue here also for me is that I have to, based on the timing of this, if this were not to pass as an example, I have to start right now. I would have to start to look at how am I going to be able to cover the 860 positions that would no longer be available to me as we move forward into the planning for the expiration of this tax in 27. And what fiscal responsibility means is that would start off with a hiring freeze right now. I wouldn't be able to hire any more police officers. Those that retire or trid out would not be replaced. And here's how that happens. The bottom line is that you have to have a patrol force. No matter what you do, you have to have cops that answer 311 and 911 calls. So those people will not be changing out on the street. But what we'll be changing is all of those investigative units, those community-oriented policing units, all of those units that are out there making relationships in our community in places that we don't have it, to foster those relationships, to develop trust, to really go back in and collectively fight crime as a community. We're doing it better than we ever have. And all of those things are the things that I would have to look at to start to eliminate as part of our real success. And those are the things that I don't want to eliminate. But the reality is that you have to have patrol, you have to have some homicide detectives, you have to have some fatality accident detectives. And other than that, our citizens aren't going to be served in our ability to investigate burglaries and home invasions and so many of the other lesser crimes. Property crimes would almost be non-existent from an investigative perspective. So this is really difficult for all of us as we talk here. The one point I will reaffirm is that this is an extension of a tax, not a new tax. But this is also about supporting the men and women of law enforcement that are out there working day in and day out to keep our community safe. I'll give you one story just in support of this. In September of last year, I started a shoot team. Metro has probably the most successful homicide investigative unit in the country. Year over year over year, we're over 90% of our solve in homicide. So if you commit a homicide in Las Vegas, you're going to get caught. They're exceptional detectives doing exceptional work. It's a whole of agency approach. But what we found when we had a shooting incident where somebody was hit, but the individual did not die, our solve rates broke off to about 30 to 50%, depending upon who was investigating those. This shoot team I put together with existing resources, 20 detectives, 2 sergeants, and a lieutenant. And from September to January of last year, they solved 100% of the 43 cases that they had. So far this year, the numbers are about 67, 68. I'm not counting yesterday. We also have a 100% solve rate. Those are real people, real numbers that are getting justice delivered to them when a terrible act of violence has occurred to them. I can't continue those kinds of things if I have to replace all of those individuals out on the street and make sure that we're capable of answering 311 and 911 calls. Appreciate you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Are we ready to do questions or?
Yes, Madam Chair. I think that rounds out our presentation. I think the one thing I would note, and I did note this for the Senate side, because it's not often that we're sitting before a committee talking about successes of a lot of things that we're doing right. And what this sheriff just talked about really illustrates that when we invest in our people, we invest in the hardworking men and women of law enforcement, many who have joined us here today, because this is an important piece of legislation. We can do things that make our community safer and do it in a responsible way, where we're partnering with the community, where we're getting out there, and where we're doing things that I think make a difference. And that is what this funding helps to preserve. And so we, I think, would be happy to take any questions that you or the committee members may have. As you know, we do have the Las Vegas Mayor Berkeley on Zoom, who I believe will be giving some support testimony. But before we get to that, we'd love to answer any questions that you may have about Senate Bill 451.
Thank you so much, Majority Leader. With that, I'll go to Assemblymember O'Neill.
Thanks for making me first. This is a very difficult bill. And if anybody has the audacity to say that I do not support police, I got to say that first off. Come see me. After 40 years in law enforcement, nobody can argue that. But what I do have a responsibility to is the financial responsibility of the state. And I don't know if we have a Clark County commissioner. I know we have no Clark County commissioners dating back to the 96 vote. And I wish we did, or in between even now. I'm disappointed that nobody is on Zoom or is available that I know of. But my question is that I'm going to pose is, for 30 years, you knew this date was coming, or your predecessor knew it. So now you're asking for another 30 years to address the same issue you've had 30 years to address. What has changed or will change?
So let me jump in very quickly because I think you make some excellent points that we have certainly heard Assemblymember O'Neill, and through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblymember O'Neill, Nicole Cannizzaro, Senate District 6. I'm luckily joined also because we've reached out, right, to stakeholders who are involved in what this piece of legislation really means. So we're very grateful to be joined by Commissioner Gibson, who I think can provide some context as well. One of the things that I will note for this committee is that the conversation around this upcoming expiration of this funding revenue stream. I want to note two things about it. Number one, certainly I think people are aware of the 30-year limitations. We have had bills in this committee, in this legislature, that have dealt with different portions of funding where we are coming upon an expiration and then being asked to make a decision about whether or not we would allow for that to happen. There have been discussions about this very revenue source, but those discussions have always then involved, well, what else could we be doing, or what else could we put this funding towards? And so that's one of the reasons why I felt very strongly about bringing this piece of legislation, because I don't think that we should be necessarily doing or having those different conversations about, should we increase this funding? Should we change how it is done? Should we put some of this funding towards other things? This is a very dedicated revenue stream, right, that goes to fund law enforcement officers. And I think that there was a very real recognition with voters in Clark County, and certainly with the community as a whole, to support this. And unfortunately, those conversations about what we do as we're coming up on this expiration date are sort of I think, hamstrung by the fact that we only meet as a legislature every other year. So there are only so many times in which we can sort of bring this up, where we aren't also then, I think, bookended by the conversation of why do we have to have this conversation now when that date is so far in the future? And because those conversations have always involved, like, what else are we going to do with this revenue stream? I think it has been difficult to come to a resolution of this is how we are going to pass it. So I think that's a very practical reality of this particular piece of legislation. The other thing that I would note, because I understand your point about this having difficulties associated with it, but I would rebut that and say that the difficulties that might be associated if we were bringing a bill that created a new revenue stream or increased a revenue stream, or even if it was a revenue stream that if it expired would go away, this would be a different conversation. If this bill does not pass, the way in which property taxes are assessed in this state, owners of property who are paying that are not going to see a difference. That money is still going to come out of their tax payments because of the way that abatements work. And so it just won't go to law enforcement. So the decision for this committee is not even about some of the more sensitive things around revenue streams, but whether or not we believe that a portion of that revenue stream should continue to fund these officers. And so those are just two things I wanted to note, because I think some of that answer lies in the way in which this piece of legislation and extending it has come before the legislative body, and some of it I think maybe is more historical, and Commissioner Gibson may be able to provide some additional context around.
And welcome, Commissioner Gibson. And you don't have to go through the chair. You can always go directly through the members.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The things that you mentioned, sir, are really important to us. We have spent the last couple of years giving serious thought and, excuse me, thank you very much. I really like that paddle. My name is Jim Gibson. I'm a Clark County Commissioner. So we have spent a great deal of time really trying to figure out what we do with the initiative, with the source of revenue, how we replace it, how we augment it, how we send it forward in an effort to continue the responsibility we have to provide a safe environment in our community. It's something that has been on our mind. It has been in our discussions. It is a priority to us. The reality is that we also have felt it important to protect the dollars that were made available because of this initiative years ago. And as the majority leader has just told us, these dollars don't just go back to people. They go to other competing interests. So it turns out the city, the county, and so many other destinations of revenue are the ones that benefit. This does not go away. And we have to protect what we have. All of us gave it up. I was on a citizens committee that went around the city of Henderson. We voted on this just before I became the mayor of Henderson. I served there 12 years. And the county was voting on this initiative that would affect Metro. So not the Henderson Police Department, Metro. But we all felt that the precedent here was so critical, and we needed the capacity to be able to expand the police department along with growth in the valley. And growth has overwhelmed us in so many ways. But I'm here to say to you, I'm a member of the Metro Fiscal Affairs Committee, and growth has not overwhelmed our capacity to keep the peace. This police department has expanded in the ways that it needed to expand, not like every other department around the country, but in special and unique ways that meet real, unique, special circumstances like we have with all the growth we've had, in addition to the growth that we have had in the resort industry. I'm also the chairman of the Clark County's Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. And nearly 42 million people come to our community every year. Those people have to feel every bit as safe as they feel in their homes, or the word gets out and they will not come back. So as we look at these competing interests and the demands upon us, we have considered everything we thought might need to be under consideration and found nothing that will replace these dollars. And if we're not going to replace them, then we must protect them. And so our strategy has been to think it through, figure out what is best, and then when we make our mind up, work with legislative leaders and the governor's office to enable us to continue to receive these revenues to fund our policing activities. And I would love it if I could come here and say, you know, we found a silver bullet. It's going to be off our backs now. We don't have to worry about this. I don't know that I would want to do that because of the way that the tax revenues are distributed. We wouldn't see it come back to the homeowner, right? It would not go back to the taxpayer. And I'd rather have something to say about increases in other places as opposed to just by default having dollars fall into those categories and go to those other locations. So I don't know that I can give you a perfect answer, but what I can tell you is we have thought about this. We have spent an enormous amount of time and energy and resources looking at what we must do in order to continue to preserve our capacity to meet the needs of public safety in Clark County. And I think we've done the only thing we could do, which is tie ourselves to what the majority leader has put in motion. We're grateful to her for her support and her championing this initiative. We're appreciative of the support that we've seen and heard. And in the community, it's a whole lot of concern about what happens if we don't have 860 cops on the street. They may not understand fully everything, but they do get that. And that's the one thing that is assured unless we find a way to do it. And there will be sacrifices that aren't worth having to endure. I hope that's helpful, sir.
May I follow up? Chair Gibson, I truly appreciate what you're saying, Commissioner. But it's still, so for the next 30 years, our predecessors are going to be back here doing the same thing over and over again, which is somewhat the definition of insanity. And I will tell you, I personally believe, from my own experience, I know the value of Las Vegas Metro Police Department and what Las Vegas as a whole, what it does for the state of Nevada in driving our economy. We cannot afford to lose the officers. When you look at the events that we have, when you look at the special events that we have and the growth of Las Vegas, excuse me. But what I'm asking is there been I'm looking for a permanent solution. And for some reason, we had a meeting scheduled earlier this afternoon that was canceled for an unknown reason. I'd like to discuss this some more, but is the option even about going back to a vote of the people to make this a permanent tax in 4 years, 3 years, sometime in the near future? So I just don't like kicking the can down the street. I feel that that's what you were elected in Clark County. We were elected from the state to address the issues facing the state. And this is a very serious issue. I don't disagree. So that's all what I'm asking for is let's address it permanently, please, because we can't, and I agree, the sheriff and all the members of Las Vegas Metro do an outstanding job every single day, 24, 365, every 4 years, 366. So that's what I'm asking for, and if you could help me with that, I'd greatly appreciate it.
I think I can provide a little bit of context to that, Assemblymember O'Neill, through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblymember O'Neill. Nicole Cannizzaro, Senate District 6. So initially, when we brought this piece of legislation, the language that we were sharing from my office to the governor's office and along with some of the stakeholders who I believe you will hear support from in our community, many of whom are also taxpayers and like you concerned rightfully so about fiscal responsibility. The original bill that we were contemplating did not have a 30-year time cap. One of the requests that was made was to give this a 30-year time cap, which we agreed to, because I think the thought was we want to be able to review this, make sure it is still good fiscal policy, make sure it still makes sense, and be able to have that, I think, that additional review and check. So that became part of 451 in the Senate side before it was introduced formally, because we wanted to take that into consideration, and that was a request. That was one of the requests from the governor's office and then also from some of our community stakeholders. So that is why there is still the 30-year cap in this bill. I think with respect to the question of whether or not and why we wouldn't just go to a ballot initiative with this particular item, one of those answers I believe is provided by Sheriff McMahill. At this point in time, where we are, because we have not been able to get this bill before you until this legislative session, right? And after next legislative session, they will have already gone through budgeting. They will have already done all of that planning. They will have already had to make decisions about whether or not these officers are going to be employed. So there is not the time to go and get signatures or to fund a ballot initiative or to try to identify funding sources. It is expensive to run ballot campaigns. It is expensive to get folks together to get signatures. And with the time frame that we have on this particular bill, we are in a position where this is the solution. So certainly I think if you want to talk about other things in the future, that is a discussion worthy of being had, but is not a reason why we shouldn't vote for this, and does not alleviate the problem that is currently present before this committee, before this legislature. And that is, if we want to keep these law enforcement officers, if the folks sitting behind me in uniform, their jobs matter, we have to fund them. That is part of our, when we say fiscal responsibility, part of our fiscal responsibility is also funding the things that are important. And I think that this bill is so unlike so many other things because if we can all agree that LVMPD is doing a great job, that these men and women behind me deserve to have those jobs, and that when we call 911 or 311, we all want an officer to respond, that we believe in community policing and believe in safer communities, if we agree on all of those values, then that makes this bill a whole lot easier to pass. The other part of this, when we talk about fiscal responsibility, is that a laudable goal for us to be putting money towards? Great. Then the other piece is whether or not this is the right mechanism. Again, this particular bill does not increase property tax rates. It doesn't require anybody to pay an additional dollar. Likewise, not passing the bill just defunds all of these positions, tells these officers, we no longer want you on the force, and doesn't do a thing to lower anyone's current taxes that they are paying. So this is not a tax increase. It is not a new tax. It is not a new revenue stream. It is just a question of whether or not we as a legislative body believe that this funding should continue to go towards these officers as opposed to a variety of other sources.
And I appreciate that, Senator. What I'd ask is maybe tomorrow morning you and I can get together and
Assemblymember O'Neill, through you, Madam Chair, Nicole Cannizzaro, Senate District 6, I will always make time for you, you know.
And I greatly appreciate the conversation because I really would like to have some more conversation on it with you. And I agree with you about it's not a new tax. It does not change anything in that sense of the tax is still going to be there, the taxpayer is still paying for it. I would just like to see a permanent solution to keep our officers on the street doing the job that they're doing and continue to protect beyond 30 years. I don't think that's the part that just is scratching on me. And I appreciate it, I truly do. So tomorrow morning I'll be scratching on your door if I may, please. Thank you, Chair, for the time.
With that, I'll go to Assemblymember Haven.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senate Majority Leader, Sheriff, Commissioner, and Mayor for all being here to help present this bill today. I did have a question on the 1996 ballot initiative and the legislative process and why it is that we're here today. And I know it's been touched on a little bit, but my understanding, and this is what I'm looking for confirmation is on the ballot measure in 1996, there actually was not a sunset provision that was included in that ballot initiative. That sunset provision of the 30-year time frame was actually set by us, the legislative body, obviously not us. I was 12 at the time, but and so I'd just like to go on the record clarifying what was actually in the ballot initiative versus what was it that the legislative body took action on, and it just kind of dovetails off of my colleagues' concerns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblymember Hafen, Nicole Canizaro, Senate District 6. And so I will definitely rely on staff to correct me if I am wrong. I know Mr. Nakamoto is quite adept at understanding and remembering all of the intimate details of the legislation that we work on. As I understand it, there had been an initial funding source for officers via ballot initiative when there was what we commonly will refer to as more cops. By the legislature, there was that 30-year timeframe put on that. This extends that same timeframe with that same revenue source. And so when we were trying to put together this particular bill, initially did not have that 30-year time cap for the expiration. But I believe that there was a request from at least a couple of places within our stakeholder group as we were talking with community partners, building support for the bill and sort of getting their concerns and questions on the legislation. There was a request to continue that because it made good fiscal sense to be able to do that review and to be able to continue to have that conversation in future years. And also a request from the governor's office to include that 30-year expiration. And so we wanted to mirror that and included that as part of this legislation. But again, I'm sure I am happy to get additional clarity from staff on that.
So just to simply put it, the people voted for no sunset. The legislative body decided that it wanted a 30-year sunset so we could, at this point in time, take a look at it, review it, make sure that it is doing what the people in 1996 wanted it to do, and that's why we're here today, correct?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblymember Hafen, Nicole Canizaro, Senate District 6, I believe that to be the case. And that is exactly what we are trying to do here, right? We're taking a review. How many officers is it funding? What kind of good work are they doing in our community? What does that represent for us? And is this something we want to continue to do? And I think the case that we are trying to make to you today is that the answer is yes, we should continue.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblymember Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator, good to see you in an air-conditioned building this time. And I'm so sorry about your New York Yankees. Tough loss. Sheriff, Commissioner, thank you guys. I'm struggling in understanding some of the machinations of this whole system. So the taxes for 92% of the residents of the county will not go up. That money will just simply be collected and then reallocated to the other 110 or so taxing bodies. The question is why is everybody calling this a new tax and it's an extension of a tax and, those arguments when it's just simply a reallocation? I mean, we're voting for just to continue the reallocation from where it's coming from that everybody's gotten used to living off of, with or without. And maybe Mr. Nakamoto can answer that. I mean, I don't see this as a really is an extension of a tax. I mean, the tax is already there. It's just the reallocation of it.
Thank you for that question. Through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblymember Gray, and it is good to see you as well. And I appreciate that question because I think that that really is maybe saying all of the things out loud that everyone has been talking about, right? Why is this becoming such a contentious issue? I think there are two pieces to that. Number one, functionally, as a logistical piece, people who are paying their property taxes currently in Nevada, we have a very much more complicated, and I'm sure we could get quite the, I think, lesson from Mr. Nakamoto on all of the property tax pieces. But functionally, the reason why we say if you do not approve this, this does not result in lower taxes for folks, is because of the way in which our abatements work. And so most folks will just not see that decrease. It's just that they'll continue to pay that portion of property taxes, but it's going to go to all of the places in which everything else that you pay goes, is maybe the simplest way to say that. Certainly the Clark County can will certainly echo that, I believe, because we have gone through this with them as well as we sought to understand this piece of legislation so that we could explain just that to you. I think, unfortunately, as with some things in this building, things become overly political. I very much believed that this was an important piece of legislation and said we should bring this forward. I know that this is something that is necessary. I don't think that we should be having all these other conversations about where we should be siphoning off additional monies to go to other things. This is rightfully going to the men and women of law enforcement who are doing very critical services in our community. And I don't want to make this a political issue. I want to make this about whether or not we are going to support and continue to support these positions within LVMPD. I think sometimes when we see words like revenue, we tend to maybe march into different corners and then decide that this is the thing that we are going to fight about. I guess my plea to this committee and to this legislative body is that this is not the item that is going to make that difference, right? This is not the thing that is going to say we are more or less fiscally responsible. This is not the thing that is going to say whether or not we raised revenue or didn't. This is simply continuing to fund these positions and to sort of, I think, extrapolate that into, well, this is a new tax and this is a new funding revenue and this is going to be all of these things. I think you're going to hear from many community members who are in support of this piece of legislation, and certainly we're on the Senate side, who are taxpayers, who are organizations, businesses, resorts in our communities who are talking about this, right, who would be subject to that. The same folks that you would see typically sitting at this table in opposition, if this were something that were raising revenue, imposing a new tax, they're in support of this bill. And I think that that is a critical thing to maybe point to outside of us as legislators or some of the commentary out there. This is not a political issue. If we believe in supporting law enforcement, and I've spent a lot of my career as a prosecutor, I have worked with amazing men and women at LVMPD who do a great job, is something that we should be proud of as a state, really. And if we believe that when you're talking to constituents, they should pick up the phone, call 911 in that situation, when you really need someone, these are the men and women who are running into those situations saying, we are going to help. If you believe that that is something that is laudable, something that this body should take as a priority, this is not the vehicle to get spun up on over whether or not it's a revenue increase, because all of the data and all of the evidence belies that notion. This is not something that is going to raise people's rates. It is something that we will continue to pay because of that abatement piece. And this is something that I think absolutely goes to a source that is not only necessary, but is doing a great job in our community. And I can only surmise that the reason why there has been so much additional talk about this as being that is because we see the word revenue and we automatically think to that, and it's being overly politicized, and I would encourage this body not to do that.
Thank you for that explanation. One question that you just triggered my mind. You mentioned resorts. There's one of the things that keeps me awake at night with regards to our functions in this building, and that is making sure we've got a decent budget and making sure everything comes together. Our budget is still heavily reliant on gaming and the resorts. And Sheriff, you may be better to answer this one. I really, really feel that those revenues could be affected should we lose 860 officers and the city gets branded as a Wild West town or something along those lines. I almost, and like I said, I'm still struggling with this one, but it almost seems irresponsible to do that and put our other revenues in jeopardy as well. Your thoughts?
For the record, Sheriff Kevin McMahill, Madam Chair, through you to Assemblymember Gray, 100%. Right now, as you know, when COVID hit, the Strip shut down, and that period of time when the Strip was coming back, we experienced a tremendous amount of crime on Las Vegas Boulevard. We've been able to get that under control. In fact, right now, the Strip is as safe as it's been in a very, very long time. We have done a number of different things with additional police units down there on Las Vegas Boulevard to make that environment so that people, the 42 or 48 million that come through the airport per year to want to spend their money in the economic engine of our state, has to be protected. But I would be irresponsible to tell you that I could look you in the eye and say that all the resources that we could keep would stay on Las Vegas Boulevard when I have millions of residents to also protect that live in our city. And so it's not something I'm looking forward to even having a conversation about if we don't get there, because it's just not realistic. We have to protect that vital ground on Las Vegas Boulevard to continue to drive the economic engine of our state. That just has to be done.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Assemblymember De Silva, and you guys can go directly to the members. You don't have to go through the chair.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Senator, Sheriff, and Commissioner, for this presentation. I have a question. The spirit is a little bit different from my colleague from the north, from Carson City. So the question really is a technical question about the dates. So say if there, for whatever reason, future legislature, say the people of Nevada through the legislature want to change the allocation, maybe instead of 20 cents, they want to go to 22 cents. Would they be able to revisit this legislation in the year 2037, in the year 2047, and tweak that around if they want to see a greater sort of funding for public safety?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember De Silva. Nicole Canizaro, Senate District 6. I think the short answer is they could. But that is true of any piece of legislation. No one legislature can bind the future hands or tie the hands of a future legislature, right? And so to the extent that when this comes up again for consideration upon that 30-year timeframe, a different legislative body can make all kinds of different decisions. And so I think we've tried very hard with this piece of legislation to mirror what is in current law, what is the current status quo, so that we can maintain those same officers. And that's what you're seeing presented in this bill, but certainly nothing about this piece of legislation would forever bind the hands of a future legislature.
Okay, good. I was just checking. We were going to have one more. I just have a simple question, and I feel bad because I got the opportunity to meet with the officers before our hearing. But you said something very interesting I was kind of intrigued by, is we have various revenue sources that support our officers down in Clark County. And with respect to the 20 cents, and I don't think this includes the 8 cents, the permanent 8 cents on the $100, but for our 860 officers that are covered in this revenue source, are you seeing right now with the way revenue is going, that's coming into this for the budgeting of that 860 officers, increasing, decreasing, or kind of staying stagnant? Because I know the growth down south hasn't been increasing as much. So I was just kind of curious if you've been able to grow officers off this, or are we in a situation where it's pretty much been only able to cover the 860?
So one of the things, Jim Gibson, Clark County Commissioner, and Madam Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. The reality is that the revenue streams today are kind of up in the air, but this one is not so much up in the air. There's some stability around the property tax that makes an enormous difference for us. And what we hope for, and I hope that I gathered in what you were asking, what we hope for is that we can continue to do exactly what we're doing today, because there are some things, there are other pressures on this department that maybe are known to you, maybe are not known to you. We have liability issues that we're constantly battling. There's a bill that is trying to work its way through the legislature today in response to some of the things that have been happening to us. The workers' comp issues are just growing. You have a bigger department. You have changes to the law from one session to the next, and that changes the commitment that it takes to field and fund and respond to the needs of the department. It's critical to us that we have a stable tax in order to operate. We continue to struggle with the rest of it. The City of Las Vegas has about a third of the responsibility for all of the things that are metro. We have about 2/3 of all of that and the jail. And all of that is very, very expensive. So what we're hoping for is real stability. This provides that for us. We are not seeing right now projections that tell us that there is a need to be overly concerned when it comes to this particular, the performance of this particular source. There are other sources that are challenging us as a county and the city, I'm sure.
Thank you. With that, I don't think we have any other questions, so we can go ahead and, unless you guys have any other comments, we can go ahead and move on to testimony in support of Senate Bill 451. And for ease, I'm going to start with the Zoom, if that's okay, because that would allow you guys some time to step back. Chair Gibson, I didn't know if you wanted to give testimony in support. I know you were asking questions, but if you want to stay up there, go ahead. But I'll go ahead and start with Mayor Berkeley and then make my way back to Carson City.
Good afternoon, Chair Bacchus, Vice Chair Considine, and members of the committee. My name is Shelley Berkeley. I have the privilege of serving as the mayor of the fabulous city of Las Vegas. It is an honor to join with Sheriff McMahill and Senate Majority Leader Cannizzaro and County Commissioner Jim Gibson in support of this most crucial of issues, public safety. Public safety is an absolute bedrock of a safe and thriving city of any size. It is absolutely essential to economic development and business growth. It is the backbone of all that we do to serve our residents, from parks and streets to schools and jobs. Without high quality, reliable public safety, our communities, our neighborhoods, and our families are at risk. Senate Bill 451 aims to renew a revenue source approved by the voters nearly 30 years ago. You've heard that before. It has helped fund police officers whose primary mission is to keep our community safe. Without this bill, the sheriff estimates, as you have already heard, that they will lose funding that supports over 860 police officers. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is our police force, and the city provides approximately a third of its budget. The city is a very diverse jurisdiction. Keeping all of it safe depends on well-trained and well-equipped police officers. Now is the time to strengthen public safety. SB 451 does just that by securing the funding that supports our police officers. This bill is absolutely critical for our continued success in the city, in the county, on the Strip. We stand with you and support the sheriff, the Senate Majority Leader, the County Commission, the resorts, and the chamber. The City Council voted unanimously just a few weeks ago in support of this bill. It takes all of us to keep our community safe, but we need the police officers to actually enforce the law. I cannot imagine what we would do with 860 less police officers in our communities. It would be a disaster. Together, let's get this done. The city of Las Vegas, through the mayor, is here to answer any questions, but to support the legislature in your decision-making process. We are here for you and with you and in support of all of our constituents. And I thank you so much for letting me come and speak with you. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. You know, I love coming up to Carson City and seeing everybody, but there was city business today that I just could not get away. So thank you for your courtesy of allowing me to present to you via technology and Zoom.
Thank you, Mayor. With that, we can come here to Carson City for testimony in support of Senate Bill 451. Whoever's ready can go start us off.
Good afternoon, Chair Backus, members of the committee. My name is John Abel. Not only am I a proud LVMPD police officer for the past 18 and a half years, I'm also the government affairs director of the largest police union in the state. We also are part of the largest alliance in the state, representing the vast majority of law enforcement in the state. I strongly stand behind Sheriff McMahill and every officer in this room, as well as every officer patrolling the streets of Clark County at this very moment. I strongly urge you to pass this bill. You cannot support the idea of police without supporting the fact that they need to be funded no matter where that funding comes from. So with that, please pass this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Harrison Porter, Harrisonporter. I'm here representing the Las Vegas Police Managers and Supervisors Association, which represents the sergeants, lieutenants, and captains of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. We are in strong support of SB 451 to continue the dedicated funding to police officer positions with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Since its inception, it has played a critical role in maintaining public safety and ensuring our police department is adequately staffed to meet growing needs of our community. By extending this bill, it ensures long-term stability and predictability in funding for law enforcement without increasing the current rate or imposing new financial burdens on citizens of Clark County. Our community continues to grow, and with that growth comes a corresponding need for well-trained and well-resourced police officers. By passing this bill, the legislature reaffirms its commitment to public safety, community trust, and fiscal prudence. We urge you to support this critical measure, and thank you for your commitment to the well-being of all who live and work in Las Vegas and Clark County. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Vince Saavedra, Vince, V-I-N-C-E, Saavedra, S-A-A-V-E-D-R-A, and I am the Executive Secretary Treasurer to the Southern Nevada Building and Construction Trades. I strongly support Senate Bill 451 because I strongly support Las Vegas's Metropolitan Police Department. Public safety is the foundation of which our industry and our communities are built upon. Construction sites are frequent targets for theft, vandalism, and organized crime, jeopardizing not only the valuable equipment on these projects, but also the material and the safety of our workers. And when you do that, you put the public at large and at risk. A robust, well-staffed police force is essential to stopping criminal activity. Every time a crime occurs on a job site, it's not just the property that's at risk, but it puts the lives in danger of our workers. Reason being, when they steal copper, they steal wires, they steal things from cranes, elevators, things like that, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what happened that night. We don't know what works. And so with that being said, it also delays the projects. The economic impact of crime on construction industry is a staggering estimate that suggests that theft alone can account for up to 10% of the project's cost. These crimes delay projects, inflate insurance premiums, and can even drive up housing and infrastructure costs for everyone in our community. When projects are delayed or budgets are strained by crime, it means fewer jobs for less people. The higher the crime rates go up, the less people want to build in our city. That's why Southern Nevada Building Trades proudly stands with Sheriff McMahill and the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Greg Esposito. Early last year, my firm's services were retained to go through North Las Vegas and speak to as many voters as possible because North Las Vegas was also facing this exact issue. The same 30-year timetable was expiring. And so we spoke to quite a few voters in North Las Vegas over the months. And the answer we pretty much universally got was, well, duh. Like, why would we not want to fund our police force? Why would we want to reduce our safety? And that was universal. We really came across very few people who didn't like the idea of making sure that their homes were safe, their neighborhoods were safe. And I think if you go back to the records, it was on the ballot in the primary, and it passed, I think, with the largest margin any ballot measure has ever passed within Nevada. The people really support the idea. They don't care about this 20 cents. They don't see it now. They don't care about it now. I represent a lot of workers who appreciate the safety that they feel in their homes and they feel as they send their kids to school. And so the voters believe in this, and I hope that you guys can support it as well. Thank you.
Chair and members of the committee, Nick Vasiliadis for the record on behalf of the Nevada Resort Association. I won't repeat what everybody else has said, but we stand in strong support of this bill. I would like to touch on just one specific issue, just because it was brought up several times for the resorts. The truth is, the tourism industry doesn't need the bad thing to actually happen. We just need the perception that the bad thing can happen. And a headline like 800 plus police officers are no longer in uniform and no longer not only working the resort corridors, but the rest of the neighborhoods in Clark County and Las Vegas. I mean, people go up to Red Rock, people go out to Mesquite. I mean, we have folks, visitors who come through that don't just stay on the Las Vegas Strip, but they go throughout the valley and, quite frankly, throughout the state. But given that this is specific to Clark, we think it's extremely important that you guys support this measure because it is something that could absolutely impact tourism in the gaming industry as well as the rest of the city and our community. Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Wachter, Senior Vice President of the Retail Association of Nevada. We too are in strong support of the bill. The Retail Association of Nevada is usually very judicious when it comes to what new revenue that we are willing to sign off on. We don't consider this new revenue. In fact, our businesses, if you choose to not take this action, would not see a decrease in their property taxes. We do, however, believe that the need for organized retail crime and keeping our community safe are very important. We do want to speak to the expiration date. We were one of the groups that was very much pushing for that. For kind of one reason. One, as a retail industry, we make investments that are long-term, 20, 30 years. We have to be able to build the logistics train, we build the warehousing, and we're actually putting brick and mortar in the ground. And when we do that, we need the investment to be long enough and to know that the community support and the police support are going to be throughout that entire investment. From a financial good public policy standpoint, we do want those taxes to be reviewed every once in a while. And so we would anticipate in 2055 that legislature will be back here having the exact same conversation that you're having today, and they will hopefully determine the same thing that you're going to determine today, which is that this is working, it's a public good, and that they should continue it. But we do think that it's important that that conversation happens 30 years from now, just like this conversation is happening 30 years from when it was first passed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. With that, I don't think anyone's in Las Vegas wishing to give testimony and support. So I will go to the phone lines. ABH, do we have anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in support of Senate Bill 451?
Testify in support for Senate Bill 451. Please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, Chair Bacchus and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mary Beth Seawald. I'm the President and CEO of the Vegas Chamber. I would like to thank Senate Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro for bringing this critical piece of legislation forward. The Vegas Chamber supports Senate Bill 451 because we have a collective responsibility to ensure that public safety receives the necessary funding it needs to serve our community. SB 451 is essential to the success and well-being of our community, and the Chamber strongly supports extending the funding for more than 800 Las Vegas Metro Police Department police officers. The retention of these positions is critical to our public safety system and services. The business case is simple. Properly funding LVMPD police officers helps promote economic growth by addressing crime and fostering a secure environment for businesses, residents, and visitors. SB 451 means that police officers will be able to effectively respond to emergencies, investigate crimes, and build community trust, contributing to a safer and stronger community. The economic benefits of funding these police officers include attracting new businesses to Clark County and the expansion and reinvestment by existing businesses in our entire community. From a taxpayer's perspective, the Chamber believes that the necessary provisions in the bill, such as the 30-year limit on funding and components of good tax policy, because it is fair, simple, and broad in its nature. Thank you so much for your time and consideration in supporting SB 451 and ensuring that our residents and visitors are safe. Thank you.
Chair, the lines are open and working. We have no more callers choosing to testify in support.
Thank you so much. Next, we will go to testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 451. We'll start here in Carson City with opposition testimony.
Good afternoon. Cyrus Hojjati, Hojjaty. I'm not in strong opposition. There's a lot I like about this bill. I respect our law enforcement. They're doing a great time. I think 800 officers are very important. Many can argue that response times by police officers is very, very important. I just have a concern, correct me if I'm wrong, it's going to extend existing property taxes. And it just gets to the point like, okay, well, we're going to add this tax year after year. And I guess the question is, where is it going to end? I don't believe that property tax is the best way to do it. And first of all, I think that property taxes is really, it can disproportionately affect the bottom 50% of earners. So we believe the wealthy, the large corporate property should pay them. In fact, keep in mind, Nevada has the lowest gaming taxes in the nation. This is a it's important for food for thought. So, and not to mention, one thing I'm also concerned is this Metro Police Department covers the entire county. As you know, one county runs the entire metro area. This is the only metro area that does that. So I guess one thing that could save costs is we can redraw county lines or change, police department lines because, look, our population could double in 50 years and things could be totally different. But I don't mean to go off topic, but we prefer different revenue sources. But other than that, we appreciate the sponsor for, fighting for law enforcement and keep our community safe. Thank you.
Seeing probably no one in Las Vegas wishing to give testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 451, I'll go to the phone lines. ABH, has anyone joined us on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 451?
To testify in opposition to Senate Bill 451, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers choosing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. We'll go to testimony in the neutral to Senate Bill 451. We'll start here in Carson City. Seeing no one coming to the dais in Carson City, we'll go to Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to give testimony in the neutral to Senate Bill 451? We'll go to the phone lines. ABH, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in the neutral to Senate Bill 451?
To testify in neutral to Senate Bill 451, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, Chair Backus and committee members. For the record, Becky Dutro, DUTRO with Nevada Taxpayers Association. The association is neutral on this bill. However, we'd like to highlight the effects of passing or not passing the bill, which has already been highlighted, but we feel is important to understand. If this bill is passed and the tax is extended, taxpayers will not see an increase in their property tax bill as a result. This is not a new tax or an increase in the tax rate. However, it is crucial for taxpayers to understand that if the bill does not pass, the LVMPD property tax rate is subsequently decreased, Most taxpayers will not experience a reduction in the property tax bills due to the tax cap abatement provisions in NRS 361. The current property taxes paid by the taxpayer will simply be allocated to other entities and uses. However, reducing support to LVMPD could result in a loss of critical public safety services. Using my tax bill as an example, currently there's approximately $5,000 of abated property tax, and the amount of property taxes I paid was just over $1,000. The amount of taxes levied for the LVMPD this current year was $68. If this tax was no longer imposed or reduced, that $68 will be deducted from the abated amount, lowering the $5,000 abatement balance, but not lowering my $1,000 tax bill. My tax bill will stay the same, but the previously collected $68 for LVMPD will now be proportionally distributed amongst the other taxing entities. Additionally, due to the provisions of NRS 361 and the tax cap abatement, which was not in effect when the property tax was originally imposed and voted on, if the LVMPD rate is no longer imposed or reduced and Clark County and the City of Las Vegas were to implement a jurisdictional tax rate increase, it would not generate the same amount of revenue that would be allocated to public safety funding. Furthermore, there are various other provisions, including statutory limits on tax rates of those entities, that prevent a straightforward comparison or replacement of the tax. In my previous role as Assistant Treasurer in Clark County, one of my primary responsibilities was running revenue projections related to discussions just like this. With the property tax cap abatement provisions, the math just does not math anymore and does not allow for simple apple-to-apples replacement of the tax. We thank the Majority Leader for bringing this bill forward, and thank you to this committee for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much. With that, I would invite the bill sponsor back up to the podium. Sheriff McMahill, for any closing remarks? You all good? Okay, well, we appreciate that. I can go ahead and close the hearing on Senate Bill 451. And then at this time, in accordance with rule number 57 of the Assembly Rules, subsection 4, normally a bill that is heard in the Assembly Committee has to wait 24 hours after the close of the hearing to work session an existing bill. We have received approval from our speaker to go ahead. He's waived the 24-hour rule, permitting us to work session Senate Bill 451 this evening. So I will go ahead and turn it over to staff for our work session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I am Michael Nakamoto. I serve as Chief Principal Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division. Senate Bill 451 was sponsored by Senator Cannizzaro and was heard, about 10 minutes after 4 until just now by this committee. Senate Bill 451 provides for the continued imposition, use, apportionment, and administration of a property tax rate of 20 cents on each $100 in assessed value in unincorporated areas of Clark County and the City of Las Vegas, which was originally approved by voters at the November 1996 general election to be imposed for a period of 30 years for the employment of police officers within the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, beginning July 1st, 2027, and ending June 30, 2057. There were no amendments proposed to the bill. Madam Chair, if there are questions, apparently I know things, or at least that's what was testified to, so I can attempt to answer those. Thank you.
I don't think we have any questions for you, Mr. Nakamoto. With that, I would entertain a motion to do pass.
So moved.
Guys threw me off. I have a first from Assemblymember Nguyen, a second from Vice Chair Constein. Is there any comments? I'll go to Assemblymember Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to vote yes on this to get it out of committee, but I, as usual, I'll reserve my right pending any new information that comes out.
Thank you, and I'll go to Assemblymember O'Neill.
I'll just go ditto. I'm sorry they were moving the bill that quickly when I believe we have the 24 hours to wait. And I'm looking forward to my discussion with the senator, and actually I'm hoping Commissioner Gibson may stick around for a few minutes after committee today to talk about it, please. So I'll vote yes with reservation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. With that, I don't see any other questions or comments. So those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously with those present. With that, I'll sign the floor statement to myself, and we can go ahead and open the hearing, and I'll let you folks, if you all, because we have a very exciting cannabis bill next, but I'm sure you all have a flight that you would like to catch. So while our officers are exiting, as well as those in support, I'll go ahead and open the hearing on Senate Bill 41 and invite our Department of Taxation to the front. And whenever you make it up here and are ready to start, feel free. I think I opened the hearing on Senate Bill 41. I kind of said it, and then you could take your time coming to the front when the officers were leaving. So officially, I will open the hearing on Senate Bill 41. And for the record, we do have a quorum. If anyone else sneaks out, we may have to have a subcommittee on this bill, but I think we're going to be okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Shelley Hughes, Executive Director for the Nevada Department of Taxation. I have with me today Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, Chief Deputy Executive Director, and together we will be presenting an overview of SB 41. And I also have Deputy Director Mitchell, who will be manning the PowerPoint. So by way of reminder to this committee, the state imposes excise taxes on wholesale and retail sales of cannabis, as well as sales tax on cannabis and cannabis products. NRS 372.290, subsections 1 and 2, establish an excise tax at the rate of 15% of the fair market value at wholesale of cannabis. This tax is the obligation of the cultivation facility and is levied on the first transfer of cannabis from a cultivation facility. The wholesale cannabis tax revenue is distributed to the Cannabis Compliance Board. NRS 372A.290, subsection 3, establishes an excise tax on the retail sale of cannabis and cannabis products by a retail cannabis store, a retail cannabis consumption lounge, and an independent cannabis consumption lounge at the rate of 10% of the sales price. Cannabis or cannabis products sold to a patient card holder are not subject to the 10% retail cannabis tax. The tax is the obligation of the adult use retail store, retail cannabis consumption lounge, and the independent cannabis consumption lounge, and it can be recovered from the purchaser. The retail cannabis tax revenue is distributed to the State Education Fund. Sales tax is also due on the retail sale of cannabis and cannabis products and other tangible personal property sold by cannabis entities. Retail cannabis stores, retail cannabis consumption lounges, and independent cannabis consumption lounges must file a monthly sales tax return that includes taxable sales for adult use cannabis and cannabis products and taxable sales to patient card holders in addition to the cannabis excise tax return. As we've presented to this committee on prior occasions, the sales tax rate is made up of a minimum rate of 6.85% as well as additional local sales tax options. In 2019, the Cannabis Compliance Board, or CCB, was created with Senate Bill 533, and CCB took over the regulation of cannabis licenses, while the Department of Taxation remained responsible for tax obligations. However, this dual agency oversight has resulted in the CCB becoming responsible for enforcing tax obligations and deficiencies through its authority over licensing. SB 441 aims to streamline the administrative processes related to tax compliance and impacts to suspension or revocation of a cannabis license for failure to satisfy tax obligations through the imposition of a cannabis tax permit from the Department of Taxation. The bill would require sellers of cannabis or cannabis product subject to the excise tax to obtain a cannabis tax permit from the department in addition to a seller's permit as applicable. A cannabis business may renew its license on an annual basis with the CCB, and to qualify for renewal of the license, the business must be current with its cannabis tax obligations with the Department of Taxation, including filing returns and remitting payments. Business entities may enter into a payment plan under certain circumstances to pay outstanding liabilities. At times, cannabis businesses fail to submit required tax returns or pay the tax liability owed to the state. Alternatively, we have cannabis businesses that will enter into a payment plan with the department in order to renew their license with the CCB and default on the payment plan immediately thereafter. Upon renewal of the CCB license, the business is allowed to operate for another year and may continue to accumulate a huge debt to the state. The department has no ability to stop the cannabis excise tax liability from continuing to accrue for another year until the CCB license is renewed again. And many cannabis businesses have ended up going into receivership, and the state loses out on the cannabis excise tax revenue. The cannabis tax permit is necessary regardless if a business holds a seller's permit, because the seller's permit can only be revoked for failure to pay sales tax. No such permit exists for a cannabis excise tax. As a result, the department does not currently have any authority to prevent a cannabis business from operating and accruing additional tax liability. By requiring cannabis businesses to obtain a cannabis tax permit in addition to the seller's permit from the department to operate in Nevada, the department can have a role in protecting state revenue outside the annual renewal process. We have heard some concern from industry that many cannabis businesses may be in danger of losing their licenses permanently if their cannabis tax permits issued by the department are revoked for failure to pay excise tax after only a month or two of being late on their tax payments. Notably, the bill provides that CCB may suspend, not revoke, a cannabis license upon a final decision regarding the revocation of a cannabis tax permit by the department. Moreover, CCB must immediately reinstate the license upon confirmation of compliance with outstanding tax obligations. Finally, as Chief Deputy Navarez-Goodson will explain when she walks through the sections of the bill, the cannabis excise tax permit is a collection tool for the department to use as a last resort to collect any outstanding tax liability. The department's intent is always to keep businesses operating where prudent and rarely pursues revocation of a taxpayer's seller's permit, which will similarly be the intent for cannabis excise tax permits. Furthermore, the language of this bill and existing provisions of the law provide several opportunities for a business to come into compliance with its tax obligations before the department would initiate revocation proceedings of a tax permit. Even after such revocation proceedings begin, the business still has several months as it works through the appeal process before the ALJ and the Nevada Tax Commission before a final decision on a revocation is reached. With all that said, a cannabis business is given many opportunities to come into compliance with its taxes before there is even a chance that it will have its license suspended with the CCB. I will now turn the presentation over to Chief Deputy Navarez-Goodson to present the various provisions of the bill.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, Chief Deputy Executive Director for the Department of Taxation. As Director Hughes mentioned, I would like to present an overview of SB 41, which takes into account feedback that the department has received directly from industry, from the CCB, as well as our internal staff who work the cannabis accounts for the department. Cannabis license renewals and other disciplinary actions, including civil penalties, suspension, and revocation of cannabis licenses, are governed by the Cannabis Compliance Board pursuant to NRS Chapter 678B. CCB has existing regulations governing disciplinary actions, including provisions for licensees that fail to operate with the various tax obligations with the Department of Taxation. Under existing CCB regulations, a licensee must operate with all required permits, pay taxes to the department, and file monthly tax and sales reports or payments to the department. Failure to satisfy these tax obligations results in various categories of violations and resulting consequences, including civil penalties and potential suspension or revocation of the license. These violations would similarly impact renewals. The CCB is proposing to amend each of these violations related to tax issues and create a new, less serious violation for failing timely to pay taxes or file returns, which penalties would decrease from civil penalties and potential suspension or revocation to written warnings, significantly decreased civil penalties, and minor suspensions. In light of these proposed changes from CCB, and for the reasons described earlier by Director Hughes regarding the intent of SB 41, the Department and CCB would prefer for the Department to enforce and conduct hearings regarding all tax-related obligations. SB 41 accomplishes this goal through the existing requirements of a seller's permit for sales tax and for the new requirements for a cannabis excise tax permit for the cannabis excise taxes. A final decision by the Department regarding suspension or revocation of such permits will result in automatic suspension of the applicable cannabis license by CCB until the taxpayer can become compliant with outstanding tax liabilities. Accordingly, if SB 41 is enacted, it is anticipated that CCB would remove its regulatory provisions governing license discipline for the failure to comply with tax obligations and instead enforce the requirements of this bill for suspension of a license. Sections 1 through 5 provide for various definitions applicable to the provisions of this bill related to businesses and persons which sell cannabis or cannabis products in Nevada. Section 6 governs the establishment of the cannabis tax permit. This section differentiates between a seller's permit, which is already applicable to persons who sell cannabis and cannabis products and are responsible for remitting sales tax to the department, and the new cannabis tax permit is also provided for in this section. Under this section, a person must obtain the seller's permit, if applicable, and the cannabis excise tax permit before CCB may approve the applicable license pursuant to NRS Chapter 678B. Section 7 requires the department to grant and issue a cannabis tax permit for each place of business within the county and provide the applicant with a full written explanation of the tax liability of the permit holder for the collection and payment of applicable excise taxes. Such permit is not transferable. This section is modeled after the same requirements for a seller's permit set forth in NRS Chapter 360. This section would also require the department to issue the cannabis tax permit within 15 days of receipt of an application, and the department would not charge a fee for the cannabis tax permit. Section 8 of the bill governs the notice and hearing requirements for suspension or revocation of a cannabis tax permit. This section confirms the distinction between a seller's permit, which again is applicable to sales taxes, and a cannabis tax permit, which is applicable to cannabis excise taxes. This section further provides that any hearing for the suspension or revocation of the cannabis tax permit must be held not later than 30 days after notice, unless such hearing is continued by the department for not more than an additional 30 days for good cause shown. However, a permit holder will be provided an opportunity to cure the tax deficiency before the notice of hearing is issued. The opportunity to cure requires notice by the department of the nature of the deficiency, along with 30 days to pay or execute a payment plan to pay the debt, or to cure any default on an existing payment plan. If the deficiency or default cannot be cured within those 30 days, the department will issue that notice of hearing to initiate the proceedings for suspension or revocation of that tax permit. Upon conclusion of a hearing, the department will issue a written decision regarding suspension or revocation within 30 days, and the permit holder will have an additional 30 days thereafter to file an appeal with the Nevada Tax Commission. The Tax Commission will consider the matter at its next available public meeting and issue a written decision within 30 days thereafter. A final decision of the Tax Commission is subject to judicial review. A final decision of the department, if it is not appealed to the Tax Commission, or the decision of the Nevada Tax Commission, must be provided to the permit holder and submitted to the Cannabis Compliance Board within 5 days. Upon receipt of that final decision, the Cannabis Compliance Board will deem the applicable license to be suspended on the day the final decision was issued. Moving on to Section 9, this section does provide for the judicial review of a final decision of the Nevada Tax Commission or Department as applicable. This language is identical to language authorizing judicial review of other final decisions of the Nevada Department of Taxation or the Tax Commission as set forth in NRS 360.395. For a person to seek judicial review from a final decision, the person must pay the amount of outstanding liability or enter into a written payment installment agreement. Section 9.5 of the bill governs transfers of interest of cannabis licenses, which is commonplace transaction. NRS 678B.380 provides that licenses are not transferable except as provided by regulation of the Cannabis Compliance Board. CCB's regulations 5.110 and 5.112 provide requirements for transferring all or a portion of ownership interest in a cannabis business. The Department of Taxation becomes involved in these transfers of interest where there is an outstanding tax liability by a person or entity seeking to transfer its license, which most often occurs around the time of renewal. As indicated above, for a license to be renewed, that licensee must be timely on their tax obligations. In accordance therewith, if a person or entity seeks a transfer, the department may enter into a conditional transfer of interest with the licensee and CCB to ensure the payment of all outstanding excise taxes through the sale or transfer of proceeds, including requiring proceeds from any sale or transfer to be put into escrow for the department. The department reserves the right to pursue responsible persons or successor liability on outstanding tax obligations for non-payment through these agreements. It is in the interest of the licensee to pay the outstanding tax obligation to settle this debt to allow for the renewal of the licensee for the new owner of the license. This section again models existing language for other taxpayers in NRS Chapter 360, which provides sufficient time for the department to determine the amount of tax liability of the licensee wishing to obtain the transfer of interest. Moving forward, sections 10 through 12 make various conforming changes to the bill, and section 13 relates to the action to be taken by CCB against a licensee whose seller's permit or cannabis tax permit are suspended or revoked by the department. If the hearing decision or decision of the Nevada Tax Commission, as applicable, supports revocation or suspension of a seller's permit or cannabis tax permit, this bill would provide for automatic suspension of the cannabis license by the CCB to prevent the business from continuing to operate and establishing more debt to the state. Once the business comes into compliance with the department, the Cannabis Compliance Board will automatically lift the suspension. Finally, sections 14 and 15 relate to the applicability of the cannabis tax permit for existing licensees and the effective date of the bill. The department is requesting an effective date of January 1st, 2027, by which time the department's cannabis excise taxes will have been implemented within the department's new tax system, known as the Mint system. Furthermore, the department believes that providing more than 1 year from the enactment of this legislation for an existing licensee to become compliant with any outstanding tax obligations is more than sufficient to qualify for the permit. If the licensee cannot accomplish this compliance timeline, this section would confirm that the department will immediately issue a notice to the Cannabis Compliance Board for that licensee to be suspended in the same fashion as they would under Section 13 of the bill. With that, Madam Chair, we conclude our presentation of SB 41, and we would be available for any questions.
Thank you so much. With that, members, let me start with Assemblymember Roth.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. My question is in regards to the due process for suspensions. Does this follow what we do for other businesses?
Yes, thank you, Assemblymember Roth. For the record, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson with the Department of Taxation. Yes, that is correct. It would follow the same process that we have at the Department of Taxation. An appeal could be issued for the note, or there would be a hearing in response to the notice of a hearing that would be issued to the taxpayer. It would go before an administrative law judge. That decision would then be appealable to the Nevada Tax Commission, and then thereafter they would be subject to judicial review.
Thank you. And then do you know how many businesses would potentially fall into suspension based on the language of this in like the last year or so?
Shelley Hughes for the record. Assemblymember Roth, I'm not sure if they would fall into suspension because we'd have to go through the process and we would give them notice and then work with them to get into compliance. But currently, we have 251 registered accounts. Out of those 251 registered accounts, 161 are currently compliant. 78 of those are non-compliant, and 12 of those are currently non-operating, though they're registered with the department. You're welcome.
Thank you. And I have a quick question that I just noticed when you were going over it. You know, you read stuff and then you catch stuff a second time, and I may have missed something else. But when I'm looking at kind of the triggers of the securing of the cannabis permit under Section 6, subsection 1, it starts off, in addition to any other permit required by law, comma, before the issuance of a license by the board pursuant to Chapter 678B of NRS, comma, every person desiring to engage in or conduct business as a seller within the state must, for each place of business, ... register and get their permit. Is it the intent of the Department of Tax to also make sure those that have existing licenses also secure a permit for renewal of their license?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson with the Department of Taxation. Yes, what that section is intended to do is to separate between the seller's permit, which is going to be applicable to those who sell cannabis or cannabis products for sales tax purposes, and the cannabis excise tax permit, which is going to be for those sellers who are responsible for the excise tax. And so if I'm understanding your question correctly, the intent there would be that any other permit that is otherwise required would also be required for renewal. And with the effective date of the bill being January 1st, it's our hope that all existing licensees would become compliant in order to obtain that tax permit on or before January 1st, 2027.
Yeah, because I quickly went over what was taking me some time as I took a look at Chapter 678B of NRS, and under those provisions, it's clearly delineated between securing a license and then the renewal of the license. And so that's where I was kind of a little confused when I was reading Section 6, because I'm like, oh, it could just only apply to those first-time applicants for a license, as this is a condition, like a prerequisite before they get their license. So I just wanted to make sure that the intent of the department is that it's expected to get that any licensee, even renewing such license, would be expected to secure a permit. Okay, you guys are nodding your head yes.
Yes, Madam Chair, again, for the record, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson. I would point more specifically to Section 15 of the bill, which is intended to have existing licensees obtain those permits on or before January 1st, 2027.
I appreciate that. I'll go to Assemblymember Nguyen.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to make sure I put this on record, because maybe you've said it in the presentation, but you are very detailed, so sometimes I'm not caught up yet. So there is no cost to this permit, right? Just want to make sure that I get that out there.
Yes, thank you, Assemblymember Nguyen. That is correct, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, for the record. There will be no cost for the cannabis tax permit.
Could I get a second question, Chair? Thank you. And just want to ensure that the two agencies works together, you and the CCB, in terms of licensing, and then your team. Are the deadlines of the permits are similar? I know that might be the case for new applicants, but for existing folks, are they all going to be caught up and eventually dealing with one deadline versus multiple deadlines?
Thank you, Assemblymember Nguyen. For the record, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson. Any person at this point wishing to obtain a new license from the Cannabis Compliance Board would have to obtain the cannabis excise tax permit first before a new license would be issued. I assume that licenses could be issued, by the Cannabis Compliance Board at any time. And so in order to obtain a new license under this bill, they would have to obtain the permit first. If there's an existing licensee on or before January 1st, 2027, they will be required to obtain that permit, and then that permit just exists as long as they're in business. And so they'll be subject to license and renewal with the Cannabis Compliance Board under their existing timeframe right now.
So just to clarify, there would not be a expiration date, so to speak. As long as they are in compliance, there would not be an expiration date. It's a one-time permit.
Yes, again, thank you, Assemblymember Nguyen. For the record, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, you're correct. It is a one-time issuance.
Thank you so much for the clarity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. Do we have any other further questions for Department of Tax? I don't see one, but I do have a follow-up question. I think this permitting thing's unique. I actually leaned over because I'm just not familiar with the seller's tax. That's not my type of business, so I've never had to get a seller's permit to submit a sales tax to you all. But with respect, are there any other businesses like analogous? Like, is there like a other type of permit other than like a seller's sales tax permit? Like this, I'm just fascinated by this.
Yes, Madam Chair. This is Shelley Hughes for the record. The other types of taxes that you might want to have a permit for, we already regulate. So alcohol, tobacco, they both have to have renewals annually, and we do not renew their license if they are not up to date with their tax liability. This is a unique situation because CCB regulates the license, and we just collect the tax. So that's why you have the uniqueness of the excise tax permit.
And I forgot I had another question that I had written down earlier. And this may be out of your all's wheelhouse, and it may be more appropriate for the Cannabis Compliance Board. But under, one of the challenges we heard, obviously the committee sponsored AB 430 last session, and always the struggle was our wholesalers are expected to pay tax, and sometimes they're not being paid by the retailers. And in my mind, I was thinking analogous to the Nevada State Contractors Board and laws that will hold a general contractor liable for not paying its subcontractors. And I don't know if anyone's ever floated that idea. Is sometimes the wholesalers, and I remember at the beginning of our almost 120 days ago, I guess, 3 weeks shy of that, you all had presented, and maybe not here, maybe it was in Ways and Means, on the outstanding collections amount for basically our cultivators, our wholesalers, on their tax obligation that was owed. So I never thought, I was just curious if anyone had ever looked at that, because one of the real struggles was making sure that the cultivators were actually being paid by the retailers.
Shelley Hughes for the record. So the actual statute language makes the obligation for the tax on the cultivator. Unless there was a legislative change, I don't think the department could pursue something like that, but I do think that is probably something that could be moved forward to help the cultivators.
Thank you for that. And I think that was the last question. I don't see any other questions. So if you guys want to sit back, I think the room has been kind of cleared out, but we may have some people here. We'll go ahead and open up our hearing for testimony in support of Senate Bill 41. Anyone wishing to give testimony in support, make your way down here. With that, we'll go to Las Vegas. I don't think there's anyone else there wishing to give testimony in support, so we'll go on the phone lines. AVH, is anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in support of Senate Bill 41?
Testify in support for Senate Bill 41. Please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, the lines are open and working. We have no callers for support.
Thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and open up the hearing for testimony in opposition of Senate Bill 41. We'll start here in Carson City. Seeing no one making their way up here, seeing no one also in Las Vegas, we'll go to the phone lines. AVH, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 41?
To testify in opposition to Senate Bill 41, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers for opposition at this time.
Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and move to neutral testimony. We'll start here in Carson City.
Thank you, Chair. James Hum, Executive Director of the Cannabis Compliance Board here in Neutral. Just also to follow up on a lot of these questions as well, we work very closely with the Department of Taxation on all of these issues. So we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to work with them as the tax permits are conveyed and as renewals come through for our licensees. So thank you.
Thank you. No one's in Las Vegas anymore, so we'll go to the phone lines. AVH, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in the neutral to Senate Bill 41?
To testify in neutral to Senate Bill 41, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers for neutral.
Thank you. With that, do the bill sponsors want to give any closing remarks? They're going to waive that this evening, so we can go ahead and close our hearing on Senate Bill 41 and move to our last item on our agenda, which is public comment. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to give public comment this evening? Seeing no one in Las Vegas, I'll go to the phone lines. AVH, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give public comment this evening?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers choosing to give public comment at this time.
Thank you. And with that, this concludes our hearing tonight, and we will have our next hearing on Thursday, May 15th. Thanks so much. Have a great night.